Good morning, everyone. It is morning. It's morning here. Good evening across the ocean, if you're over there. And I know Mayun is there, I think. So this morning's Dharma talk is titled Don't Explain. Isn't that what I said?
Stop explaining.
Stop explaining? That's good enough. Stop explaining. And of course, I have to qualify that. There's something I'm getting at here, and I don't know what other title to use. But another one is less is better. Because anytime we tend to overcompensate for what we perceive is lack of information, lack of convincing, lack. Basically, this is just highly polished and stylized ignorance. It's a way of protecting yourself against a very deep nature of reality. As I say over and over again, don't believe anything I say, but you could consider it. You could look deeply into your own mind. This doesn't mean if you're getting ready to go somewhere and you should explain, perhaps, if you're living with someone, why you're going, where you're going. But I'm not saying that fundamentally don't explain. I'm saying don't elaborate too much on anything, especially if it gets into some kind of abstraction that's more than just going to the store to pick up some groceries. If somebody starts to ask you about why you're doing anything, keep it minimal. Because then, even though you can't explain what you're doing, I'm old, as you know. I've been doing this a long time, longer probably than anybody here. You cannot explain what this is. If you start to explain, unless you're a Vasubandhu, and even he fell short. How did he fall short? He died. He should have stayed alive. Everyone falls short. Death comes without warning. You're going to die. I'm going to die. What dies? The voice dies. The hearing dies. The smell, the taste, the touch, the thinking all dies. But it does not end anything. That's a misunderstanding. And this is why there's so much fear. This is why people live their lives out of fear of poverty, fear of success, fear. And I'm sure you'll notice that people want to find out why you're doing stuff. Or the other one is why you're not doing stuff. Like, I would like to ask everyone here and everyone that's listening to me, why don't you go into prisons and volunteer your time? Why don't you? Tell me why. I think you're getting my point. I'm saying you can't. Causes and conditions should not be ignored. They should be included. Everything that is arising in your mind stream or in the apparent mind stream of someone else is delusion. Again, consider it. And this kind of thing comes up over and over and over again. Because the root cause, ignorance, is what? Ignored. And we come up 3 or 4 or 5, 16 stories up in the air, and then we try to solve all the causes and conditions, and blaming and attribution is all in that area. No one looks deep. Few people do, but not many. How the Buddha 2,500 years ago in the society that he was in, how he managed to distance himself from his father, his mother, from the community, from the kingdom, from being a prince. How he managed to do that is just astonishing. From the point of view of what? Doing something. From the point of view of explaining something. But from the point of view of dependent origination, no explanation needed. If you see what this is, nothing is a mystery to you and nothing is explained. It is called not to. Not to is not just coming up with some really cool idea about things are not separate, or even saying we're all one, which is a incredibly naive, pompous, and over bloated idea the ego has about we're all one. Just relax, we're all one, man. We're all in this together. You hear it all over the news. And if you can stand it, you can listen to MSNBC, CNN, and they won't just give you the news. They want to play background music to it. They don't want you to really know what's happening, even relatively, even on the third story or the 15th story about this caused that, caused that, caused that, they're to blame, they're to blame, they're to blame. We got to do something about it. It's just, well, I'm not going to say it. You know what I would say if I were going to say it. And it would not be very fragrant. Train your mind. If you're listening to me, 15, 20 people are listening to me, I'm saying, concentrate on that, please. Please. Train your mind. You don't need me. You don't need anything else. If you understand what that is, sit down, hold still, and watch the confusion. Don't interfere with the confusion. This is what society does. It closes up, closes it up, closes it up, closes it up. It gets more and more confused. And then suddenly it notices there's confusion, and it explodes against it. War and peace, war and peace, war and peace. Ignorance form, ignorance form, ignorance form. Picking and choosing, picking and choosing. They're right, they're wrong. They're right. Well, the Sokuzan is this, but the Tibetan Buddhists attain enlightenment in one lifetime. Just a bunch of advertisements. Painful to hear. It would be like me saying, you shouldn't do that, you should do this. How many times do I do that to anyone who comes and gives me permission to? They're kind of disappointed that I don't tell them to do more. Sokuzan, I'm giving you permission to teach me, tell me what to do. And then I may or may not say, what do you think teaching is? You have your idea of teaching. Is that you're waiting to see if Sokuzan is going to start teaching in the way you think you should learn? Look at the whole education system. It's like the military. You do really well, you get credentials. You do really well, you get a degree. I have no degree. Probably should have got one. Life would have been a lot easier than working in a factory. I'm not against anybody who has degrees. Of course, you should have the society we're in. We should have that so that when we say something, we don't have to explain. We've got a degree. That's like me. I'm wearing this, so I don't have to explain. What I say is, you should consider it. Don't believe it. So stop explaining. This doesn't mean be offensive to people and rude. This means what? Meet people where they're at in the confusion. You don't have to point out, by the way, you're really confused, in case you hadn't noticed. That's not going to help them. You might as well be pointing a gun at them in some kind of symbolic way. Respect people's confusion. Look out in the world, look on the news. People are not respecting each other. And of course, they have justification because in the case of Black people, they haven't been respected for 400 years. Of course, that's going to build up, and then it's going to explode. And it looks like it's exploding. It looks like it's not going to slow down for a while. Don't explain. Stop explaining. This doesn't mean don't pay attention. Don't look whatever arises in your mind stream as an explanation, but don't buy it, don't sell it, don't do anything with it. Write books. Unless that's what you need to do. You'll know. You have to do it. If you have to do it, then it's dependently risen and it is choiceless. The only reason I say is don't do anything unless you have to is so it gives your particular karma, whatever that may be, a time to actually look and see, should I do that? Should I do that? She's doing it. He's doing it. Jim's doing it. Mary's doing it. They're all wanting me to do that with them, but should I do that? And if I don't do that, what are they going to think? You know exactly what I'm talking about. It stinks. And why does it stink? Because it's just on and on, perpetuating the delusion instead of being radical and going to the source of the situation, which is ignorance form, avidya, samskaras, marigpa, formations. And, those of you who are studying this have a little bit of an idea. If you're not studying it, then Don't explain. Don't tell me why you're not explaining it or you're not studying it. And that also means don't explain to someone else. Don't explain to yourself. Explain nothing. Don't add. Stop it. And how do you stop it? You have to see that you're doing it. And how do you see that you're doing it? Sit down, hold still, and watch the movement of your mind to object to this and agree with that. Happening all the time. How do I know? You know how I know it. I watch it all the time over here. I couldn't teach if I had somehow become some wonderful, knowledgeable sage who was going to dispense words of wisdom. Not interested. On the other hand, and on the same hand, if you're ready to hear this, I'm ready to tell you. But I have no advertisements, no propaganda, other than to say everyone is suffering. We could do something about that rather than try to stop the suffering. Let's look at it. Let's look at the confusion that starts at the root of the consciousness of the mind. The saying coming out of a Yogacara tradition that everything is perception only. Before that understanding can arise, you may have to look deeply into that which keeps separating. You may have to look at the warfare, and that warfare may be the warfare in your own mind stream. Don't stop it. Warfare. Don't promote it. Warfare. Don't shut down on it. Look away from it. Warfare. Very simple teachings that go back many years. The three poisons: passion, aggression, and ignorance. Be aware. Don't interfere. Don't accept. Don't give anybody any advice about anything. No propaganda. It may look to others, maybe thousands, maybe 100. You got a lot of friends. Like you're not doing what they're doing, so therefore if you're not for it, you're against it. I think wasn't it George Bush that first said that? You're not against it. Well, I don't have a degree, so I'm not likely to be able to remember that. And again, I'm not mocking that. I'm just saying it is a credential, not the intelligence. It's a credential. Just like this is a credential. Come and get me. You know what I mean by that. Jason, question.
Jason bowing. Is there a difference between explaining and clarifying something? And I'm particularly thinking about if you're having a conversation with somebody and it seems like there's some sort of misunderstanding, to try to clarify what you're seeing.
Yes, that's called meeting. If I'm understanding you, that's called meeting somebody where they're at. But if you think you're right and they're wrong, and you're trying to convince them that they should think the way you're thinking, then you're, as far as I'm concerned, I would never say this to you because it's up to you to see this. You're actually breaking your vow to be with all things. You might have to break that vow over and over and over again before you see what the vow actually is. Be with all things. That doesn't mean accept anything. I look like I'm accepting something. It doesn't mean, and it also doesn't mean that you should shut down on it and just not try to share with them anymore. You should meet it where it's at. And for the ego mind, the self-centered mind, the narcissistic mind, the me mind that doesn't want to be right, it doesn't want to be wrong, it wants to always be right and be correct. It's going to be a challenge until you've seen through this solid being that looks like a person, that has some kind of personhood, that some kind of self-validating situation. Of the two, keep the principal witness. And who is that witness? Find out. It's not a being. It's not a person. It's not an individual. It's consciousness only. Yes.
Can you clarify something without rejecting or ignoring the other possibilities?
Yes, it's called, what is that called? I think it's called skillful means. It's the functioning aspect of wisdom. And it doesn't know it's doing anything. It's not looking for credit. It's not looking for blame either direction. And it's not looking for, and this is an important one, it's not looking for a result. This is materialism. And it's rampant. It's so rampant that it's tiring. But as the attorney said, said this whole thing was tiring to him. Can't remember the fellow's name. Chris was his first name. He also said he wasn't going to stop. He wasn't going to give up working with this difficult situation. You have a question over there?
Just a comment from Junji, who said the Zoom, this is 15 minutes ago, she said the sound is bad on Zoom on our end, but I don't know if something's...
Can all of you on the Zoom screen that I can see, can you hear me?
Oh, now she says it's fine.
Yes.
We have a bunch of thumbs up.
Yes.
So I would watch making that hitchhiking gesture. Otherwise, somebody will come and pick you up and think you want to ride, misinterpret you, drag you into their Uber, charge you, and take you to Honduras.
Well, Shoka has a question.
Let me guess what he's going to ask. Let's see. What would Shoka ask? That'd be a good name for a talk. What would Shoka ask? I don't know. Go ahead.
He asks, what is the difference between communication and explaining?
Communication is listening, and explaining is running your mouth. Simply put. Don't produce. Produce out of what you see, not out of what you know. Do I have to yell that? Produce out of whatever is happening. Produce that. This is what I'm not talking. There's no one here talking, saying anything. If you see somebody over here, that's your mind. It's not the truth. It's your mind, which may show up as the truth. Contemplate that. So you know what I'm saying. I'm not saying there aren't things moving back and forth in that area, but basically receive what's there, so that if you do find that you're going along receiving, and then you do find that it's time to produce, it won't be a thought pattern that is generated behind that. Stop it. And how do you stop it? You have to see that you're doing it. You have to see that you keep interfering with everything based on wanting to survive. It's part of being the consciousness showing up in an animal form, living form. Those need to be protected. We need to protect everyone equally. You could say equally. Equally wasn't even a word. If you see what you need to do, you wouldn't say, well, we need to be very fair about this. It would just happen spontaneously out of each situation. It would fundamentally help people where they're at, instead of, like has happened recently, killing them based on you don't want to look bad.
Maria Belling. How to be skillful if we are asked to explain?
So, Maria, it would depend on the situation. It's very situational. If someone say, for instance, if someone says, why are you a monk? I would depend on who it was, but I'd start off very simply by saying, I'm not really sure. And if they change the subject and say, well, got to get going, time to go and put in my orders for good weather. Or if they say, well, I don't understand what you mean, then you could say, well, I want to be more clear about the difficulty I was having. I want to be more clear about that. And if we go further, then I might say, well, it seems to be a good way to be able to dedicate myself to helping others insofar as I have their permission. So do it situationally, just less is better. And you could start out by saying, I'm not sure. Then if there's any intelligence happening there, which is the intelligence that receives, not produces, then they will say, what do you mean you're doing something without knowing what you're doing? You say, well, I kind of know, but it's just difficult to say. So, a little bit of magnetism doesn't hurt there. See if there's really an interest. Because if there's no interest, you don't need to go into propaganda about how they should meditate and train their mind. That's none of your business. There isn't any your. Business is business, but there isn't any your business. The way it becomes your business is when someone asks for your help You look at the situation and then you help or not. Or maybe you'll say, I can't help you with that. Have to get a word processor to handle that problem. Questions are good, please come, or I'll keep talking.
Kevin Bowing.
Yes, Kevin.
Earlier, Sokuzan, you said, don't explain even to yourself.
Yes.
Can you talk about how, like, self-reflection or contemplation or even insight might color that?
I'm ready.
Okay. Tell me.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Don't do it. Don't do anything with it. If the minute something arises coming out of the alia, basically, if we use that model, coming out of some other dark space, call it the alia, call it the closet, call it the attic, some other area, something starts to arise, do nothing with it. If it's coming, then you could receive it. But if it's coming, you have to receive something. But it's already coming in the front door. Don't do anything with it. What? Just observe. And then if your mind starts to develop ideas about that, I shouldn't be doing this. That's incorrect. I need to do this. I need to stop doing that and doing this. Then listen to it. But don't add on a conclusion about what's arising and try to get rid of that negative feeling so that you can do something that's right, either in your eyes, because of your conditioning or enculturation, or in your parents' eyes, or in your best friend's eyes. Very, very important area. More question about that, Kevin, if you want me to go further into that?
Yes, well, more specifically in the relative moment, a lot of what is happening in the culture is people of color and Black people asking or demanding or inviting white people to look at their white privilege and quote unquote unpack that or dismantle that. How can we, first of all, is it possible to dismantle white privilege? And then I'll ask another question.
So I'm an old white man, so I'm already disqualified from any of that. So on the other hand, what I say, I teach, my focus is on something else, is on going much, much deeper, way down into the basement and 15 feet under the basement floor and to the center of the earth. I'm not being fancy or romantic. I'm just saying we have to go very, very deep where we run out of knowledge. We run out of roadmaps. We run out in order to find the fundamental issue. So as meditators, if you're a student of mine, then that's what I'm encouraging you to do, to find out fundamentally what the mistaken identity is, because that's the source of all this. You can fix things on the surface, but the fundamental warfare will just go underground and pop up in another lifetime. And this is, if I were to, this is a time when I can say something I can explain to you because you're students of mine, or at least while you're watching this, you are. But I can't explain this to someone who has no mind training. All I can do is listen and be reasonable and listen to what they say. And they say, well, so why don't you go? Why don't you come out and join us? You say, it just doesn't feel appropriate. And then if they want to interpret that into you being against them and supporting the Black Lives Don't Matter or something like that, then that's up to them to do that. Of course, you don't support that. You may have been contemplating this a long time ago. I certainly was when I was a little boy, about why is it that my parents thought there was something wrong with people who had a different skin color. And so I was conditioned also. I am prejudiced. I can't help it. I was trained to do that. But you can't get rid of prejudice. If you think you can, go ahead and get rid of it then. But what you can do is, because of the conditioning, you can be aware of the prejudice so that prejudice doesn't overflow into your situation, so you hurt people or shut people out. So this whole trying to control things on the surface, dependent origination. This is the way most people who don't have no mind training at all. This is the only way. I even know people with a lot of mind training who think there's only one way to fix this, and that's to march on march for or against. And I would also say, yes, that's probably what has to happen to get us to be more aware for what this is, but it's much more radical than that. It's not just repairing the surface, repairing the powers that be, the blue uniforms, and make them go back into blue uniforms and not have monster suits that are all black where you can't see their face. That's part of it. But it's still more of the kind of a Band-Aid approach. Don't misunderstand. I'm not saying it could be a really great Band-Aid to not have those kinds of horrible things happen anymore. But there's more to it than that. It goes way, way back. Don't believe a word I say, but I'm about to say something. I do not want you to believe this. You could consider it. You could reflect on why I would even say such a thing. But you're not separate from anybody. The separation comes out of fear not wanting something different.
Katie has a question. She asks, I find that I add when I am extremely anxious. How do I not add when my anxiety is skyrocketing?
Don't have to stop adding. I would say don't add, but I know you can't stop adding because I add. But if I say don't add, then your awareness is more likely to see the more subtle ways that you add on things. Something happens and you slip something under the door. I don't want to add too much, but just, would you mind reading this preamble to the Constitution? So addition is very subtle. So when I say don't add, don't do any math, then this brings the awareness, if you understand what I'm saying, brings the awareness to the production part of the mind. Adding, subtracting, dividing, doing this based on what? Hidden hope and hidden fear. And it is run by that rotating wheel of passion, aggression, ignorance, passion, aggression, and ignorance. Bring awareness into that, which is not a person. And then it will still function relatively. It'll function in terms of cause and effect for a while until eventually one sees through the fundamental misunderstanding, which is that of belief in personhood or ego. There is no person.
Michael Bowing.
Yes.
Could you talk about how we're not separate from the murderer?
Yeah, you're the murderer. Bluntly put, you're not, you are that. You are that. That doesn't mean that you are, as a person, that Michael, when someone is murdered over here, that Michael is somehow to blame for that. I'm just saying you're responsible. That is the ability to respond. You're responsible for everything. Everything is yours. If we begin to see that, which I don't know of any other way, I'm not saying there aren't 15 other ways, but if we begin to see that through starting at the root, the fundamental issue is this, each being here, thinking that they're a real being living in time and space. This is a misunderstanding. And if you see it, it's so profound that you can't say anything about it, because I even have students that don't understand what I'm saying. A lot of them. But that doesn't mean that they won't eventually, if they continue to train their mind to see clearly. You will not, it does not result in a conclusion like, oh, we're all one. Very unlikely. It won't even result in a conclusion as we're not separate. That's just a teaching device. Even that's a lie. Every time I open my mouth, I lie. That's why I say don't believe a word I say. But I lie because I produce based on what I see, which is Buddha nature. But the causes and conditions that we see here, like this noise, we see this stick, this altar top come together, and it produces something else. This, and a noise. You can take that to an infinite number of directions. But that very situation there goes everywhere. It goes back. You can't count how many years. It isn't even years, it's so much. And it goes into the future at the same time. It's not separate. A way of talking about something that can't be described.
Susan Olcott has a question.
Certainly.
Is the emotion of hate, in essence, a form of spiritualism? meaning wanting the illusion of others to fully understand one's emotional response.
Maybe a little bit. It's a self-centered kind of thing of wanting control, of imputation that there's somebody who needs to stop that, or somebody who needs to join that, or they're not separate. And this is not easy. That's why I say don't explain, because if you have an idea of what I'm saying and you try to explain it to somebody, I don't know who's going to watch this, a few people, but this is specific to people who are training their mind. If you're just all wound up in your thought patterns about right and wrong, up and down, back and forth, and you're really proud of your thinking process and think you're kind of got a little bit ahead of everyone else, a little bit more intelligent than others, you kind of see you're more objective than other people. Subject, object, not two. Go ahead.
She just has a further part of the question. I meant the above emotional projection and seeking direct understanding of pain. Is it a form of spiritual materialism?
I wouldn't say that it is directly, but if I understand your question, I would have to respond and say it could show up that way. Looking for the source of pain, which is not necessarily spiritual materialism. Looking for the source of pain and wanting to blame somebody and then fix that, that's spiritual materialism. Thinking that you can get better. Thinking that you can no longer have any anger. Further questions?
Anna Maria bowing.
Yes.
So, observing this incident that happened to George Floyd, that incident seems to have triggered or set off an opposition to that, and the appearance of all police reform and all of these things, all this movement that is coming about. And I mean, I've heard you say before about just the concept of opposition and the do nothing or just observe. And I'm wondering if we hadn't had that video of what happened, it appears that all this other movement and everything that wouldn't have happened. So I'm wondering, does violence without opposition exhaust itself?
Well, conceptually, it works that way. But what happens is we make assumptions about opposition. We make assumptions about violence. There are people who are very violent. They would be astonished if you thought they were violent. There are also people who are extremely prejudiced who think they're not. To think you're not prejudiced is prejudice. If you're a human being, you cannot help but be in opposition to something based on fear, hope, and all the other things that are going on. So it is about awareness as much as possible, not about becoming better or higher or more anything. Not that that couldn't happen, not that you wouldn't, if you begin to see the fundamental nature of this labyrinth that we're all in called samsara, that you wouldn't start to function in a way that's basically helpful. Try to do good. Try not to do harm. Try to be with all things. This does not mean agree with them. This does not mean a pacifist. You think I'm a pacifist? Come and attack me. You'll find out how much pacifism is going on here. No position. I take no position. You could say, well, isn't that a position? I don't know. Ask Jordan Peterson. Ask Nietzsche. Ask some smart person.
Anna Maria bowing.
Yes.
We talked about at some point if I or you or were standing there when this happened to George Floyd, that I may very well have lunged in there, maybe gotten myself killed, but there's an opposition there.
Yeah.
That would maybe have felt necessary. So I guess I'm trying to understand also the permanent versus the temporary here.
I hear you. What's the question? It's getting too much of a labyrinth. I mean, I understand.
Welcome to my mind.
Yeah. Well, welcome to mine.
The concept of warfare.
It's the same as peace there.
I was going to ask you, is the concept of warfare devoid of of opposition?
Well, it's a concept, so it may sit in the cookie jar, and that's the end of it. It's a concept. But using those concepts to try to control war and peace, to try to use any kind of opposition to get something else, or to get some side of the teeter-totter that works, and the other side is all black and needs to stay down in the muck. It's just warfare, and it's opposition, and it implies that it reifies, it encourages the basic misunderstanding that shows up on the spiritual path, that of duality, that there's two things. There are not two things anywhere. Everywhere you look. If you see this, everywhere you look, you don't see anything else. There is no elseness. Doesn't mean you don't function as a person who still picks things up and sets things down, a person who still eats, who still laughs at jokes, functions as a relative situation. But the fundamental understanding has transcended this world without leaving it. In other words, think about that, reflect on it a little bit, not too much. But if non-duality is really the case, this is an astonishing situation. It is a completely sacred world, and it's a miracle. And there is no good, there is no evil. Those are intense misunderstandings based on ancient tribes and compartmentalization and intense mafioso. We just bring that family together so we can control, we can overcome the infidels.
What is the appearance of violence that's coming from awareness?
It's a projection, and we fight with it. Just like in the thing that happened in the fellow who was named Brooks, Rashard Brooks, was killed by the police officer. You have it right there. We have the building up and people without any mind training. I'm not saying him. I'm not saying the police. I'm saying anybody without any mind training, without any kind of understanding that goes beyond or goes deeper than just the relative war and peace between individuals and between races and between. So to go in and try to get the laws changed, the structure, it's a problem of the structure. Yes, certainly part of it, but the fundamental nature of the human mind is what causes us to erupt over and over and over again. So ask questions. The harder, the better. You know what I mean by that? I'm saying, put me on the spot. If you want to, put yourself on the spot.
Maybe the way I framed the last question was off. I meant violence that comes from awareness.
So the simple form of awareness is I'm aware of this, and I'm aware that he's doing this or this, and I'm aware that needs to be stopped. But I don't realize that I'm actually looking at my projection, and I'm at war with my projection. Simply put, a black man scares me. That's why I became a cop. I'm just making stuff up here. I have no idea fundamentally. But then we go to war with ourselves as a projection. I do this. That's how I know about it. Have I gotten rid of anything? No. You don't have to get rid of anything. If you start trying to get rid and improve yourself, you're going to be in something that looks like a straight line, but it's going to be a circle. You're going to eventually bite yourself right in the butt. It has to be done directly. To use a relative word, you have to do it directly. That won't take you out of the fear necessarily. It won't take you out of the tension. It won't take you out of your prejudice, but you might very well see how prejudiced you are, how much you're projecting on others.
How is the Black Lives Matter movement versus the cops basically good?
The way you're asking the question, everything is basically good. It's not that there isn't horrible violence. It's not that there isn't suffering in the world and terror and fear. But we can't separate anything out and well, here's the bad things. We need to get rid of that. We need to go towards the good things. This is the model of theism or other spiritual paths that are not working with the mind in the way that is taught by the Buddha or taught by our particular way of working with the mind. So it's basically good in that it's just like there's no such thing as darkness. Darkness is not something. There's only light. And you can't know about light unless you look at the darkness, just using a very simple contrast, not trying to get into philosophy or psychology. But it says it in the sutras. The light and dark, a metaphor goes back and forth. Sure.
Choose ongoing. What is it about the fundamental nature of the human mind that causes us to erupt over and over again?
Ignoring that the ignorance that shows up as I'm somebody and this is something else. The fundamental ignoring of a complete open dimension. And it's been going on and on and on. So whether we have something like the model for that is the Alaya Vijnana, the storehouse consciousness, which is not just not a lifetime, it's lifetimes. So here we are as a human form shows up. Consciousness is here operating through the six sense fields, including the mind. And then that goes down. But consciousness itself, the very nature of that is not thought patterns and some kind of organism. More?
Wendy has a question.
Wendy.
What is the difference between explanation and description?
Well, description would be you're just describing something. And then explanation is there's some kind of imputed misunderstanding or something, somebody or myself that needs correcting or needs modifying or it's too complicated. You don't get exactly what I'm saying. So let me explain this to you, Wendy. The way in which you're thinking is not actually the way in which I think you should think. The way I think you should think is the way I think because I'm so very, very clear about everything. So if I could just get you to think more the way I think, then you could be part of my club. I'm being silly, but I'm saying we do that. We do that to our family members. We do it to, if we have any kind of tension with anybody, have you noticed? We start explaining to them. Don't do it. Don't sit, hold your seat, look at them. Make them drag it out of you. They will. Might not be comfortable. That's why I say, come and get me. I'm not saying come and attack me. I'm saying, come on, help me with this. I don't know who I am or what I'm doing. And that's not some kind of accomplishment. It's just the truth. And it's the truth for you if you see it. If you see there's no separate being anywhere. Okay, enough tears. Yes.
When something like this is coming up and you want to go march, you say, train your mind.
I do.
Here's the law. So how does meditation help us see our prejudice?
Because you're turning from the world out there, which there's all kinds of ideas and speculations and philosophies and right and wrong and up and down, back and forth, and all the whole situation, you're turning the awareness back, to use a very definite metaphor, back to see who is it that wants anything? Who is it that even desires in the first place? This is a realm of desire. Is there someone? Or is desire just self-existing? And the other thing I would say, since we're on this topic over and over again, if you feel like you need to go and make signs that say Black Lives Matter, please do it. I'm not telling you otherwise. I'm just saying that you need to be the one who understands that I need to do that. And if you do, you get no correction from me, even if you're even if you're a student of mine. I'm not going to say don't do that. I might say, how's that showing up for you? And you might say, I got to do that. That's all I need to hear. When I hear, I need to do that. If I hear it and I can hear that you're sincere, you need to do that, then do it. I'm just saying that when other people come and pick at you because you're not doing what they're doing, based on their projections about who they think you are, who they think they are, what they think your relationship to them is, and what a lot of times people want, the way they get their own validation is they can convince other people to do it too. This happens with meditation all the time. It happened to me when I first started meditating. Oh my God, this is helping me so much. I got to tell everybody about it. Probably drove people crazy. Oh my God, meditate. You guys should meditate. You should probably meditate. And that lasted for a couple of years. Don't tell anybody to meditate. Mind your own business. Don't tell anybody to do anything particular. At the same time, if somebody, the whole movement of Black Lives Matter is very important. The whole idea of the Me Too movement is very important. The whole idea of all the movements, and that this one is continuing to keep going. I think it is a powerful statement. But everybody, to say that everybody needs to do that it's just a misunderstanding, and it's a problem with that kind of a movement. That's the very energy that will flip it around so that it dies out, because it's about right and wrong, up and down, back and forth. That would be like me, not like it, but similar. What if I said everybody should go into prisons, like I've been doing for 20 years, and teach inmates? They say, well, I don't know how to meditate. Well, teach them how to weave baskets, or teach them how to work on computers, or how to study law. People should do what they need to do with their life, including the spiritual path. Mind your own business. Convert no one to Buddhism. Respect people's confusion and their clarity. And there's no way you can know how clear someone is or how confused someone is, because you don't really know how clear you are or confused you are, and you never will. Why? There is no one. There's no solid being. It's constantly, consciousness is constantly rotating and going this way and that way and this way and that way until it stops, or until you see that nothing actually happened. As His Holiness the 16th Karmapa said on his deathbed, nothing happens. That's an ultimate pointing at the mind. Nothing happens. If you think something happens, you'll go to war and peace.
Kevin Bowing.
Yes, Kevin.
You mentioned going into prisons twice earlier. You said, you asked us, perhaps rhetorically, why we don't do that. And I mean, in the four reminders, in the third of the four reminders, part of it says, and I'm reading this, not showing off because I don't have it memorized, I must abandon harmful deeds and always devote my time to virtuous actions. So as people on a spiritual path, it seems that that is kind of tied up with relative, like,
It is.
goodness.
Yes.
How do we embody, or I don't know, the word actualize this view of devoting ourselves to virtuous actions?
Yes.
Without falling into some prescription around what that's going to look like based on our
Very good. I'm ready to respond. Train your mind so that awareness that is showing up as your mind can see your own self-deception, and your actual intention for doing anything, including doing good, including or not doing anything, so that you're very clear about your intention. Not just the why part of it, but just your intention that you're doing this because you want to be a person who is this kind of a person. It's a very subtle area. More about, go ahead.
Well, then would the virtuous action be mind training?
Yes. Yes, I sometimes say, if everybody would just do what I say, I mean, like the whole world, I would say everybody should become monks and everybody should go into retreat immediately. That's what I would say. I'm being silly, but I'm just saying that without training the mind, then we keep projecting our idea about what that is on it, so we don't see what it is. If you see what is in front of you, you see that it's not someone else. It's not someone else. You're always looking at yourself, even if it's a person that you've never met before that is of a different race. That you see it deeply. This doesn't mean that you also at the same time don't see the conditioned prejudice or whatever that you were trained with, and you see that that's a misunderstanding. That may show up too, and it may go away. And if it goes away and it comes back and you get frightened about it, then that means you have more work to do on the so-called self-centeredness that thinks there's a solid being, afraid of our prejudice. So therefore we become prejudiced about our prejudice. We ignore that there are certain areas that are trigger points. Don't get better necessarily based on relative truth. Become very, very clear about the nature of this. As far as I can see, that's what this is about, is being clear about this, not getting over or under anything. But that reminder is about looking at that, say, do good. So how does that's so open. Could be lots of different ways. But be respectful of other people's wish for you to keep your damn distance. Some people are not ready. Their causes and conditions are not ready for this person to suddenly become a meditator. Whereas someone else over here, the causes and conditions are such for that person, they come in and they might be interested in for a year. And then they start to go a different direction. That is none of your business. Doesn't mean you failed at teaching them meditation. It just means that you are not what you thought you were. Yeah.
Kevin Bowing, how do we respect another person's ignorance when the way that manifests is, puts my relative personhood at risk or thrives on my subjugation?
Yeah, I would say just go slow, be respectful. I mean, it's easy to be respectful of people. If you're clear about your own difficulty and your own the abrasive quality of someone, I think I'm talking about what you seem to be asking about. Someone else's kind of demand on you to do this or that. You need to, you shouldn't, you shouldn't. Then as far as you can, be polite to them. Don't argue, but this is don't explain. Don't explain it. Oh, if they want to know more about that, then as I say, often make them drag it out of you. That doesn't mean drag it. It just means that they could ask you a question, say, so I don't understand because I'm going to act a little bit here. So Kevin, you seem to be such a kind, loving person, and yet this is all going on and there's a big movement, and yet you're staying home with your cats. I mean, don't you feel guilty? And depending on how that sounded, you might say, yeah, a little bit, but I'm not sure what I should do about it. Or you could, if it depends on the person, you could say, I'm just going to dedicate myself to training my own mind and my own ignorance so I don't make the world a worse place. That's probably not going to fly with anybody who's tearing down monuments. They want you to come and help them tear down monuments. It's just it's not wrong. It's the thing builds up, and then the society just starts to bust apart in different places, and it spreads and it magnetizes people that want to do something, want to have control. And not right and wrong is just extra there. It's just the hidden nature of consciousness that thinks there is someone who is right and there's somebody else who's wrong, and by golly, they need to pay the price. So with anyone who is coming to you, just less is better. Be polite to them. You could even say, I'm not sure, but that's not something I want to do right now. I just don't want to do that. I support what they're doing, but I just can't go out and do that right now. You don't have to have any reason or excuse or anything, because if you do, they'll talk you out of it. You can just say, here's the reasons I'm going to do this. Here's my explanation. Here, rip it apart and come back to me with your argument. And then you'll meet somebody who will probably make you feel so terrible and so guilty. Then you'll be out there. You won't be a separate person. You won't be an individual. You'll be someone who's doing what they want you to do so that they'll like you. You know what I'm talking about. I'm not accusing you of anything.
No, I do know what you mean. And I guess the other piece of that is like when ignorance, when I see another person's ignorance manifesting, say, as like homophobia, which, you know, I could take personally as a queer person.
Yeah.
There's a lot of energy around like wanting to explain why they're wrong or justify or whatever. So how do I respect someone's ignorance in that sort of area? Is it maybe more just about like listening and then just getting out of there?
Well, that would be your style.
I have an Aries moon.
Yeah. Well, I am an Aries, so we should team up and we could change the world. So,
Moonlighting.
I think, and I do think some. I think just meet it where it's at. It's so situational that each person and each, even though the same person who's talking to you twice would even be different. Their causes and conditions are extremely precarious and delicate, and also because of the shutting down part, tend to promote further shutting down and further shutting down. So insofar as you can, like I think we talked earlier about using the four karmas, pacify the situation. And this doesn't mean you have to be right and they're wrong, or they're really, to jump into any kind of right and wrong situation just makes it so much more difficult. Just be respectful to them, be kind to them, even if they may not be treating you very respectfully because they're making demands that you need to do something else, that you're wrong what you're doing. And I'm not saying that you have those kinds of friends, but you might.
Thank you.
Certainly, yes.
Susan has another question, two of them actually. Is a sense of guilt a response or choice, and acceptance of an apparent other's projection?
So the guilt did not come from the other person. The guilt is deep in your own. When I say your own, in the nature of consciousness as you experience it as your own. So the guilt is there. The guilt is the other side of guilt, or shame is pride. So the basic issue there is you don't want to look bad, and this is ego, and you don't have to get rid of it. You just have to see that it is unreal. If you see that it's unreal, I'm not saying the guilt might not be there, the shame might not be there, the pride or the wish to look good might be there, but you won't buy any of them. You're no longer in the business for that kind of malarkey. Not interested. You see the energy, seeing the energy, seeing the energy, seeing the energy, seeing the depth of maybe being able to meet it because you've met yourself where you're at. And you're not trying to fix anything. You just see that it's unreal. So therefore, you don't have to fix something that is unreal. You just have to realize that it's dependently arisen. There's no self in the skandhas: form, feeling, perception, concept, consciousness do not add up to anything. That doesn't mean there isn't form, there isn't perception. It just means that there's no solid situation happening as an other or as an identity. When that's seen through, then you're free. You're unthreatened by anything, even your own the body mind collapsing. Not interested. I'm not saying you're going to volunteer to go out and end your existence, but you're much more interested in the welfare of others. It just spontaneously shows up, and it's not because they're others, because they're yours. They're your family. They're your offspring. They're your onspring. They're spring. They're springing springing forth. Things are springing forth like rabbits. And there isn't anything that isn't your responsibility. Not just specific things, you need to come and do that. No, everything. And you can find that by facing a wall. Do I guarantee that? Nope, I don't guarantee anything. Maybe a total failure. Maybe you'll go to your grave or to the funeral pyre totally confused. Unlikely. Yes.
Sheldon has a question. He says, I spend a lot of time listening to people who are intelligent, teachers and scholars who have spent a lot of time studying how the mind and the universe works. All they are doing is explaining. It seems important to look at what they have to say. What is the difference between what they are doing and what you want me to stop doing?
I don't want you to stop doing anything. You know, I do. I want you to stop not meditating. Stop not meditating. Take some of that time when you're listening to all the scholars and the science, which is totally fascinating. It's fascinating material. I like to read about the arguments at the basis of the form called string theory. Myself, I'm interested. That's interesting to me, but it's just interesting. It's not the truth, and the truth is you. Sit down, hold still, look at the wall, and see if you can find anybody. See if you can find someone who likes this, doesn't like that. So that's what I would say. I would just say, simply put, just train your mind. I don't object to all of that. I enjoy looking at, one of my favorite things is to look at time travel movies. Some of them are really, there's one really interesting one right now called Dark. Really good one. I think it's on Netflix. Really completely different direction of time travel. And then some of it, like H.G. Wells or something like that. Another question anywhere?
Sokuran bowing.
Yes, so good.
Yesterday, Ani said to me, I think I'm not caring as much what people think of me.
Mm-hmm.
And my question is caring about what people think of us or what's arising in our minds, caring about that, is that part of the vow to be with all things? Vowing.
Again, I come back to full circle. It's not about not caring so much as it's about awareness. So the caring may show up and the caring may go away, but we're no longer tallying anything up. Oh, I'm caring less. Oh, now I'm more, because the self-centeredness will make mincemeat out of everything. That doesn't mean a pie. It will do something with everything because it wants, and it will take failure. It will take success. It'll take in between, can't do anything, just a nobody who never succeeds, never fails. It will take anything as a proof that there is somebody who is doing a certain thing, including not caring what anybody thinks. Someone who's 14, 15 years old is going to go through that kind of process in different ways, not caring and caring and elaborating on it. But it's not about any kind of conclusion. I don't care what people think. It's both and neither. It's Nagarjuna is fourfold negation, and it's crammed right down your throat. And then you realize, well, that seemed to be really difficult, but then I don't have a throat. So what was that? Find out. Find out. You can do this. If you're listening to me, sit down, hold still, watch what moves for as long as it moves. There's nothing to get to. There's nothing to leave. Anything here in the Zendo? I lied. I actually am in the Zendo. Yes.
How do we work with explanation, for example, that is coming in our direction?
Yeah.
Even as a support, like the commentaries that we're reading on some of these meaty verses that we're studying. It's all explanation,
I know.
commentary, and footnotes on that.
I know. What are you asking me?
So how can, it's somebody else explaining, so how can we receive that in a way that's helpful?
No, what do you mean by how would it feel if it were helpful? How would it feel if if you don't understand it, is that not helpful? And if you do understand it, is that helpful?
I don't know.
Well, what do I say over and over again? You don't have to understand it, but you do. If you're a student of mine, you have to study it. I don't understand it. I'm not just being foolish. I don't understand in the way that, say, Bill Walden explains, or the way Dan Lusthouse. I don't understand. I can't think like that. And I don't have any interest in it either. But I know what those teachings that they're talking about are pointing to. I do understand something about that. So that's how I respond to this, how I respond to questions. So you don't have to understand. You may find, to take that a little further, you may find that if you don't keep trying to figure it out or understand or grasp the concepts and you just study them, I think I told somebody, it was maybe it was Wendy, maybe it was Bobby or somebody, I just recently, you don't have to understand. You don't have to know what's being read. Just study it. Just read it. Just study. It's the same thing we do with the Lankavatara Sutra. Anybody want to explain that to me? We've studied it 4 times, I think, or 3. Tell me what it means. You follow what I'm saying? I'm just saying, just study it. Just study it. If you start to come to conclusions about it, then just keep a sense of humor about that. Anytime you conclude anything, I don't care what it is. And please, if any of you disagree with me, then perhaps I'm wrong.
Michael Bowen, is there something to the idea that I'm going to be tested on this?
Yeah, well, I'm endeavoring not by some kind of a goal I have or anything, but I don't want to be trained the way I was not trained. I don't want to be trained that way. The way I was trained, not only in high school or primary school or college or any of that, or even the way I was trained by Trungpa Rinpoche and his students. Not interested in that. That's a conventional way of training and testing. Training and testing. It just destroys the whole. What it does is it's not respectful to each person's way of learning. It's disrespectful. So people have to learn. If they're going to learn, they need to learn through their own causes and conditions, which for one person, an extremely watery kind of person, not just using astrology, but incredibly intuitive person who does not click into conceptual things that some other person who's very conceptual does. And those are only, even in Buddhism, I think there's 5 different families, and beyond that, there are probably countless numbers of ways of working with the mind. And so to say, well, you have to be, you're going to be tested, you have to explain what Nagarjuna's 4-fold negation is. Not a good idea to do that. That just causes a person to abandon the awareness and climb like a monkey into their tree house and try to figure out which bananas are ripe and which bananas aren't. Kind of a silly metaphor, but it's that kind of to actually abandon the very realization that we are all endeavoring to understand, which is the Buddha's Dharma. Everything is dependently arisen. At the same time, it's completely separated all over the place. It's an incredible display.
Michael Bowing. So then our practice is not a training.
Yes, it's training. It's training. It's training to slowly be genuine and stop buying into your conditioning. So don't buy and sell anything. There's no merchandising mentality going on. Trading this for that and this for that. There's got to be some of it. We still have to eat and sleep and function as a 3-dimensional entity. That's why we're in this schoolhouse called Earth. So there has to be some of that, but the idea is, your graduation is your death. If you fear death, that's like you want to stay in school. Yeah, because you're not really studying in the school. You're trying to get money. Yes.
Shoshi asks, does explanation promote a position?
Yeah. If you defend what you're doing, well, the reason I'm doing this is because blah, blah, blah. The reason I can't do what you're doing is because what you're doing is this or this. So yes, you don't need a position. The position you will have is dependently arisen. You're born because of your mom and dad, and you came here and they named you and they spanked you and tortured you or whatever they did to you. And you know, if you were lucky, you didn't have any brothers and sisters that you could murder. I'm being silly, but I'm just saying we didn't do this. There's no, the very being that we think we are, the ego mind, that did not do this. But when we get into it, we try to look for levers and controls and advantage and how can we get ahead. And education is set up that way as an intense competition, just like sports. It's not that people shouldn't play football or basketball or have sports, of course, but the intense competition around that just continues to support the polarity of some people are better than others. Misunderstanding. Okay, thank you very much.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Chi ho san chi shi hu. Chi san bu sa mo hu sa. Mo hu cha hu. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, Ure Prajna, Paramita. O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect SokukoJi Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with